Okay, today we're going to work through sheet metal layout. If you remember, our project we had started was a sheet metal box. So we already worked through doing layout in the classroom and getting set up with how to draw our dimensions out and going off of a non-scale drawing. We're going to need a couple of tools today. So our ball peen hammer, a combination square that I already have taken apart. We can put it back together just for funsies. 10 snips, aviation snips, our scratch all, center punch, some steel wool. This is Dykem blue, it's a steel bluing, so it's basically going to turn our piece of sheet metal into a blue piece so we can see our lines marked with our scratch all. And then we're going to use the Beverly shear, and then just behind me, the drill press. Drill some holes. So we're going to get started laying this thing out. The first thing you need to remember is how to use your scratch awl. Remember, it's very important you hold it in the palm of your hand like so, squeezing it with your pinky and your thumb muscles, and then you put your index finger right on the pointer, and use that to put the pressure on there and scratch. So I like to use combination square, take the steel ruler off so you have a nice straight edge. And then if you remember from your layout, we're going to do our 1/4 inch marks all the way around and get that set. It's very important that you check first off your measurements of your material to make sure that this is what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be 5.5 by 7.5. So you want to make sure you have that correct. If not, do a little time, take a little time, do some layout, scribe some lines on there, cut it square before you start. Otherwise, your project's going to come out crooked, will not be happy. Okay, so I'm going to do my 1/4 inch lines first. Get these marked out, just like what we did on the piece of paper, other than instead of using a pencil, you're using the scratch awl. So when I mark my reference line with the scratch awl, I hold it like a pencil to mark my little reference line. It's probably hard for you to see, but I have one there. Okay? So I'm going to take those two 1/4 inch reference lines that I marked, set my steel ruler up so I can barely see those lines, hold my scratch awl, put pressure down, and pull. And it's not going to make a screeching sound like fingernails on the chalkboard or anything, but it's going to make a nice, very, very defined straight line if you do it correctly. Okay, it's important we do that with our layout. Remember, we do the 4 sides for our 1/4 inch, and so on and so forth. As we work in, we're making another box inside of that box. Now I'm going to measure 1 inch from that 1/4 inch box and do the same thing. Make my marks. Okay, and go across. Now, there's a little trick to this that some of you probably figured out already, but your steel ruler, if it's a nice steel ruler, is exactly 1 inch wide. So if you did your layout correct and your piece was square, you can actually take your steel ruler and lay it on your piece, lining it up with that 1/4 inch line, being very careful that you hold everything tightly and securely. Mark this in the box. This will save me a little bit of time for layout because I'm not having to do all these little reference lines. Okay, all I have to do is run my scratch awl along my steel ruler. Okay, so basically we're going to look like this. Right, so I'm going to follow my procedures, do the rest of my layout to make sure that my safety bends are in there and the little reliefs for the safety bend as well as the tabs we need to bend over. Okay, make sure that it looks correct before you go on to the next step. So with this Dykem blue, the way to get it off is with steel wool. The reason we want to remove it now, after all of our lines are done, is because once we cut and bend this thing, it's going to be really hard to get that bluing off when it's inside the box. So what I like to do is I like to take the steel wool and just kind of rub it on there. Okay? It's going to take most of that bluing off. You could spend lots of time to get this thing super shiny, but you got to remember this is going to be the inside of your box. So when you're done, it should look something like this. You can see all of my reference lines. Okay, I can tell where I'm supposed to cut and go forward with my project. The next step we need to do before we do any cutting is we need to drill 4 holes in the corners here for a relief. For as we cut this, if you cut into the corner, because it's such a sharp corner, it's going to actually cut through with your 10 snips or your Beverly shear. So you want to make sure you drill those relief holes so that you don't have a spot for your sheet metal to rip. So we're going to take our center punch. Okay, there again, you need to hold this thing firmly. Line it up right there at the corner. Okay, now you don't have to hit it as hard as you can. Okay, this is 20 gauge sheet metal. It's really, really thin. It's easy to put a center punch mark. Okay, I'm going to go through and do all 4 corners. That way it's done. When you're done, you should have 4 little center punch marks, which become little dimples on the back side. Okay? What that's used for is for our drill bit to have a spot to start so that it doesn't walk as you're drilling the hole. Okay, my next step is I'm going to use the drill press, drill my 4 holes, and then we're going to go on and start cutting. Okay, the next step is with our drill press. You can see it's already set up here. I have my material clamped down to a piece of wood so that as I break through the bottom of my sheet metal, it doesn't blow it out. Okay, I have an 1/8 inch drill bit in here. It's already lined up with our center punch mark. It's really important that you have this drill chucked up correctly, which means in your Jacobs chuck, you tighten it all 3 spots, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, making sure your drill bit's in there centered. The other important thing to realize is because you have such a small drill bit, your speed rate of the drill bit needs to be a little higher. So we're going to turn this thing on, see how fast it's going. We may have to adjust it faster or slower depending on. I'm going to pop a hole in there, and it's a pretty easy process. Okay, my drill bit's kind of screaming here. We'll turn it down just a hair. Remember, this is sheet metal. Okay, so as you're drilling the hole and you're getting ready to break through, it's very important that this is secure so it doesn't spin around, okay? Also, as it breaks through, you want to release pressure just a little bit to keep the drill bit from binding, okay? You can see it started and it's through. Pretty simple. Okay, I'm going to set up and do the other 3 holes. Okay, you can see I have all 4 of my holes drilled in my corners for my relief cut. We're going to get started on cutting. Okay, so remember which parts you cut and which parts you save. So we need to cut the reliefs on our safety bend, back over, straight down to our tab, across the face of the tab, back over, and then the safety bend again. You're going to do that on all 4 sides. Okay, so we're going to get started with that. Now we have a couple of different tools we can use for this. I'm going to use all 3. So our aviation snips, our 10 snips, and the Beverly shear. Okay? So they all work about the same as far as cutting sheet metal. Some are easier than others for certain tasks. So we're going to go ahead and start with 10 snips just to give you a good rundown of how these work. Now you have to have some sort of hand strength to be able to do this because you're actually cutting metal with something that's like scissors. Okay? So you're going to follow your reference lines. Now remember, you want to leave the line, okay? So don't cut past the line. Cut on the other side of the line so you can see the line. If you don't leave the line when you cut, your cuts are going to be too small. Okay, so I'm making short cuts. You notice short cut, okay? Now I'm going to cut through it and cut it out, okay? Now, there's one of my initial safety bend cuts already done. Okay. Also remember that sheet metal is sharp. Okay, so don't just like rub your finger on this, rub it back and forth. You're gonna get cut. Okay, so there's the first little spot for the safety bend. I'm gonna continue that cut straight down into my relief hole. if you take short, easy cuts with your tin snips or your aviation snips or your Beverly shear, you're going to be happier. Now when it gets to a spot like that where it's a little tough to cut, don't just reef into it and keep cutting. Stop, make another relief, so come back and cut like a V out of it like I just did. Okay? And then break that off or cut that off, whatever it takes. Okay? And then finish your cut. If you just really squeeze into it, usually what happens is you overcut. And then you're going to have a problem with your box. Okay? So just a nice, easy cut. And you'll feel it as it breaks through. Okay? So, right there goes my cut, all the way right into my hole. Okay. So there's the first one. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and go straight across for this tab. Okay? Leaving my line. Now remember, we always have this thing called a file. So you can leave your line like I did. You can probably see it right there. You can always file it to the line. Okay? Clean up your cuts afterwards so it's not sharp. So now my bend is cut. I need to do the little reliefs out of the bend, the one on this side, and the safety bend, and then that side's done. Okay. So we're going to do this whole side with our tin snips. The next side, I'm going to use the Beverly shear. I'm going to have a hard time doing the whole thing with the Beverly shear just because it's not quite as precise. But like I said, I really like to see you guys use multiple tools. Okay, so that one's done. Alright, now we're going to use our Beverly shear. So like I said, I'm going to have a hard time doing the whole thing. But remember, when you're using the Beverly shear, it's very important. Number one, you keep your fingers out of the way because it will pinch and hurt. And number two, you keep your metal flat. Okay, it needs to be flat on here. Otherwise, it's going to pinch it as a cut. So, I'm going to start making my cuts. Okay, I like to hold on to my sheet metal and put my thumb on the top so I can see it, so I don't cut it. Okay, and bring the sheet metal through. It's the same way with the Beverly shear as far as you want to go all the way in deep in the throat in order to cut. Okay, so I just made lots of little shortcuts. Now this one, I'm going to take my cut pretty far, if you noticed. Okay, and then come back the other way, finish it off. Now, I don't know if you can see this or not, but I'm going to have an issue if I cut it like this. What is going to happen is it's going to bend the part I want to keep by cutting it like this on the Beverly shear. So what I'm going to do is do that part with my tin snips, okay, just so I have a nice project. You can do it with the Beverly shear. Trust me, a lot do, but you may not like your result. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and work down with this cut to my relief hole that we drilled on the drill press. Okay. There again, right down to the hole. Okay, I'm going to run into the same kind of issue, I think, with this next one. Let's go ahead and pull this piece off with the tin snips. I think I might be able to do it. Oh yeah, we got it. Okay, same deal with the Beverly shear as when you're working with your tin snips. You want to leave your line, okay? So here we go. Now obviously, when you get good with these pieces of equipment, you go a lot faster than I'm going talking you through it, but I want you guys to learn how to do this. Okay, there's number two. We did that mostly with the Beverly shear, although we had help with the tin snips. I'm going to do the aviation snips on the next one, and you kind of get the point. Okay. These are really nice tools here. They cut really good, but there again, you kind of have to be careful with them because you can get ahead of yourself pretty easily. Same process though. Okay, I'm making really, really short, small cuts. Paying attention to where my line is so that I don't cut through or cut on the wrong side of my line. Also, if you make shortcuts, it's really easy to correct yourself if you're starting to get off your line. I'll get this last one done. You'll notice with these aviation snips, it leaves almost like a serrated edge. Okay, it does that, so as you're cutting, it keeps the snips from wanting to slip or pinch the material, but it also gives you a little more that you have to clean up if you're looking for a perfect edge. Okay, but the aviation snips are really nice, especially when you have a nice pair like these. All right, we're good. We're gonna move on to bending. Okay, so this is what you should look like when you get to this point and everything was laid out correctly and cut. Okay, we're over here at our break and we're going to do our safety bends first. The one thing you guys did not see is I took my single cut flat file and I went forward and took off all the sharp edges from using the Beverly shear or the 10 snips or the aviation snips. So I just kind of filed it really easily. Just to take the sharp edges off, not really to remove any material. Okay, so on our brake, we have, I don't know if you can see it or not, but you have handles on both sides that clamp the brake. Okay, this edge right here, this is our bending edge. Okay, and then down here, there's another handle that lifts up so that we can make our bend. So, I'm going to release the brake, feed my material in. Remember, we're doing our 4 safety bends first. Okay, so what that does is it bends over the material so we do not have a sharp edge on our box. Alright. So, when you're doing these safety bends, you want to line it up so that your brake line that we scribed on here with the scratch-all lines up with the edge of the brake here where it's going to bend. I like to slide it in this way. Carefully, slowly clamp the brake on it so I can see my line just barely across there. Okay, it's important you take your time to do this, otherwise your bend's going to be off. Okay, so I'm going to bend this one up. We're going to bend it as far as it goes. Okay, so it's going to bend it about 70 degrees or so. You'll see that right there. Okay, no, that's more than 70 degrees. That's about 130 degrees, I'm sorry. We're going to bend it about that far. That's as far as this brake goes. We're going to do that with all 4 of these, and then I'm going to flatten these out with the ball peen hammer. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and flatten these. First 2, and go back and do the other ones. It's not really recommended that you use the brake to flatten them. You can, however, use the brake to help finalize your crease. And I'm going to show you how to do that. This one, we'll take the brake and try and flatten it. So I'm just going to line up the edge just like that. Because this sheet metal is so thin, you can actually do it. It makes a nice blend. Versus the ball peen hammer, which kind of makes it a little bit wobbly. But you can fix that by throwing them into the brake. Now if you're using thicker sheet metal, this really isn't recommended because these sheet metal brakes are only designed for a certain gauge of sheet metal, a certain thickness, so you don't really want to overstress them. Watch your fingers, because you don't want to pinch yourself. Nobody likes a blood blister. It's all about patience. If you rush into sheet metal work and you try and get everything done fast, you're not going to have satisfactory results. Okay? So, these are our safety bends. They're all bent over. They look really nice. We're ready to move on. Okay, so for our next set of bends, we need to bend the two wings in as well as the side. Okay, so we're going to do this on the same brake. So same kind of way, we're going to line it up with our lines. Being very cautious that we get it in the right spot. And when I'm ready, I'm happy. Clamp it down and bend it up. And now this time, instead of bending it all the way over, we're going to bend it to 90 degrees. Okay? Do the other one. And it's starting to look like a box. It's important you take your time here, because if your bends are off here, your box isn't going to fit together right. So there again, if you didn't take your time laying it out, this is where you're going to run into problems. Okay, we're going to bring it up to 90. If you go a little past 90, it's okay. Usually with this thin a sheet metal, you can pull it back a little bit with your fingers. Okay, this is what it should look like at this point. From here, we're going to go over to the box and pan brake, and we're going to break these two ends in to finish our box. Okay, so this is our box and pan brake. This brake is slightly different than the other one. It means that these fingers are removable or movable in order to fit in different sizes of material. Okay? This one is also special because it's foot operated. So we use our foot to control the clamping mechanism. It's nice because it frees up both hands, but you need to be careful that you don't step on this thing when your fingers are in the way and kind of smash your fingers. Okay? So, if your layout was correct, this should fit in this finger really well. We can bend it up to 90 degrees. Be careful that these two ears go inside of your side. So usually what I like to do is slightly bend my sides out. Okay, it doesn't take much. You can do it with your fingers, just like that, so you don't have interference. Okay. Now, we're going to fit this in. You notice my measurements were obviously pretty good because it fit in there. It's exactly the right width. Okay. Once you get it where you want it, it's the same as the other one as far as lining up with your line. You clamp that thing down. Now be careful. This is where you really need to watch for interference. I want to make sure that these don't hit this, or we're going to have some folds here that you're not going to get out. Okay? So, I think I like what I'm seeing. It's the same deal. We're going to pull it up to 90. I think I'm going to hit my camera. Okay, I'll move you back just a hair. Alright, we're up to 90. It kind of stops. You can feel it. Don't go too far. If you go past 90 with this thing, the way you're doing this compound bend here, you will put a crease mark right here on the back side because of your bend. So, okay, so no crease mark. I didn't bend it too far. You can see it's a nice 90-degree bend. Those will fold back in when we pop them together. We're going to do the other side. Now you can use this box and pan brake to do all of your bends, but I like to use both because it's nice to know how to use multiple kinds of tools. Okay, So check your interference. That was going to go on the outside. My tab was going to go on the outside of my sides, and I don't want that. So checking for interference. This is why it's really, really, really important that you pay attention as you're bending it. See? Going on the outside. So we're going to bring it back down. My hand's going to slightly bend this down. I'm bending my sides out a little more so I don't have that problem. It's really giving me fits here. There we go. That's better. Okay, bring it up to 90. Okay, so if that happens, no worries. Okay, this one, you can see we had a slight little interference as it was bending. Kind of bent it out just a little bit right here. We're going to take care of that with a pair of pliers, and it should be good. Okay, the next step is we are going to pop rivet our 4 sides together of our box that we just bent. Okay, I already center punched a hole on all 4 sides. That way I have a reference for my drill bit. There's a little trick to this. We're going to use a pair of lever jaw locking pliers. Some people call them vice grips. Okay, to hold the sheet metal together. Reason being is if you do not use these pliers to lock these 2 pieces together before you drill, that inner tab right there is going to bend as you're drilling, and you won't get a good hole. Okay, so you can do this all freehand. We're going to use a cordless drill here, our 1/8 inch drill bit. Okay, I already have my center punch mark. Just don't have to put a ton of pressure. Remember, it's sheet metal. Okay, there's your first hole. We're going to do 4 of those, and we're going to pop it. Okay, we're done with our holes. Right. When you're using the pop rivet tool, it's important you know how this thing works. Okay, so here's your pop rivet. What happens is your pop rivet tool goes on top of your pop rivet here. It basically squeezes it, so it pulls this little ball up through the pop rivet, and it expands this portion of it, which tightens into the hole. Okay, so when you put this in, you need to make sure you have the right size die in there, put your pop rivet in there, and you should be able to feel it to squeeze it. The way I like to do it is I like to actually put my pop rivet into my hole first. Okay, get it set so you know that it's down all the way. It needs to be flush, otherwise your box isn't going to be put together correctly. Okay, so I put it on the pop rivet tool. If you have hand strength problems, you may have to use 2 hands, okay? So don't be shy, use 2 hands if you need to. When it gets to the 3rd pump, that's usually where it breaks. See it? Now what it does is it pulls it so tight that it basically shears that piece off and breaks it, okay? So it pulled it that tight, and that's what it ends up with, right inside there. So I'm going to do all 4 of these. Our box is almost finished. So it should take 2 to 3 pumps to get that thing to pop. If you notice, I'm putting a little bit of downward pressure as I'm doing it because I want to keep these 2 pieces together. The other way you could put this project together is with a spot welder, which unfortunately we don't have one of those here in this shop, but if you do have one, it would be a handy tool to use. Okay, so you notice my pop rivets all in, sucked up tight. Only last thing I would like to do with this box before I'm finished with it would be deburr some of these edges. So if I have any spots that are still sharp, I'll take my flat file here and I'll just kind of deburr it a little. I think we did a pretty good job on this part. Okay? So your final dimensions of this sheet metal box is laid out correctly. Should be 3 inches by 5 inches. Remember, we started with a sheet that was 7.5 by 5.5. So I think it turned out pretty good.